They say he's mad, dangerous, cursed. But every week, at the same hour, he comes here, to the richest mansion in town, and leaves a gift for the billionaire's daughter. Nobody knows why. Nobody dares ask. Until one day, she picked it up. And in that moment, her father's world began to crumble. Who is he really? What's in the gift? Why is the father so afraid? Story time. This happened in my village. The madman and the heiress. In our neighborhood, there was one man everybody knew and avoided. Ifani, the madman. He wore clothes like he had dressed in the dark, 3 different shirts at once, trousers too short for his long legs, and mismatched slippers. He talked to himself, laughed suddenly, and carried a tattered brown sack he called his treasure bag. Children threw stones at him sometimes, and shop owners chased him away, but he never fought back. He would just smile sadly, pick up his bag, and keep walking. But there was something strange about him. Something only the people on our street noticed. Every week, without fail, Ifani would walk to the largest mansion in the area. The gates were tall, black, and guarded by uniformed men. That was Chief Okeke's house, home to the richest family around. And that's where Ifani would place a small item carefully on the steps. A wilted rose plucked from the roadside. A shiny stone polished by his own hands. A folded piece of paper with faint handwriting. He never knocked. He never said a word. He would just place it there and leave. We laughed about it. The madman is in love with Adana, we joked. Adana, Chief Okeke's only daughter. The girl was beautiful in a way that made people stop talking when she walked by. Her skin was the color of honey, her smile like sunlight, and her clothes screamed money. We thought she never noticed the strange gifts. But one warm Saturday morning, as she stepped outside to meet her friends, she bent down and picked up the folded paper. She opened it. Her eyes moved slowly over the words, and something in her face changed. She read it again, her lips parting slightly as if she couldn't believe what she saw. It was a poem. Not just any poem, it was delicate, haunting, and heartbreakingly beautiful. The kind of words that stay with you long after you've read them. She stood there, lost in thought, until a shadow fell over her. Her father was standing at the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the paper in her hands. "Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice sharper than usual. She hesitated. It was on the steps. Without warning, he snatched it from her and tore it into tiny pieces. "Stay away from that man," he barked. "He's dangerous." Adana flinched, startled not just by his tone but by the fear in his eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but her father had already turned away. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the poem and the strange man who wrote it. The next morning, Adana couldn't take it anymore. She waited until her father left for a meeting, then slipped out quietly. She knew exactly where to find him. Ifani was at the bus stop, crouched over a battered notebook, scribbling with a stub of a pencil. His treasure bag sat beside him, half open, showing an odd mix of bottle caps, beads, and pressed flowers. She approached slowly. "Why do you keep leaving things at my gate?" He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw his eyes clearly. They weren't wild or frightening. They were tired and sad. But there was something deep in them, like a memory buried under dust. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "Someone I once loved, someone I lost." Her heart skipped. "Who?" Instead of answering, he reached into his bag and pulled out another folded paper. She opened it, another poem. This one spoke of a woman with golden laughter, a heart full of kindness, and eyes like the first rain. Something about it felt familiar. That evening, when she got home, Adana went to the family study. She pulled out an old photo album of her late mother, a woman she barely remembered but whose face she had always admired. She turned the pages slowly, until she froze. There, in a faded photograph, her mother was standing under a jacaranda tree, smiling, and beside her was a young man holding a book of poetry. The same eyes. The same face. The same man. Funny. Her breath caught. How could this be? That night, Adana waited for her father to return. When he did, she confronted him. "Who is Funny?" she demanded. Her father stiffened. "Forget him. He's nothing but a..." "He's not nothing," she cut in. "He was in a picture with Mama. I want to know the truth." Silence. The clock ticked loudly in the background. Finally, Chief Okeke sank into his chair, his eyes heavy. "He was your mother's closest friend," he said slowly. "And a famous poet. Before I met her, they were inseparable. He had a publishing deal coming, and everyone knew he was about to make it big." Adana leaned forward. "What happened?" Her father's voice was low. I was jealous. I pulled some strings, ruined the deal. I thought if he failed, she'd forget him. But she never truly did. And when she married me, he disappeared. Months later, I heard his mind was gone. They said he wandered the streets, talking to himself. I never imagined I'd see him again." Adana's chest tightened. She thought of the poems, the gifts, the way his hands shook slightly when he wrote. She couldn't leave him like that. In the weeks that followed, she began visiting him at the bus stop, bringing food, water, and notebooks. She convinced a local mental health foundation to take him in. It wasn't easy. There were days he refused to speak, days he stared blankly at the wall, but she kept going. And slowly, the fog began to lift. One evening, months later, Funny handed her a fresh poem. His handwriting was steadier now, his gaze clearer. She read the final lines aloud. "They called me mad, but loving you kept me sane." Tears blurred her vision. For the first time, she smiled without sadness. And for the first time, Funny smiled back. Adana folded the paper carefully, as if it were made of glass. For a long time, she couldn't speak, afraid that if she did, the moment would shatter. Funny, she began softly, "You've been alone for so long." He shook his head slowly. "Not alone. I had your mother's memory, and you. Her chest tightened. In that instant, she realized this wasn't just pity. She cared for him deeply. Not with the romantic fantasy of a girl swept off her feet, but with the fierce loyalty of someone who had seen a soul fight its way back from darkness. In the months that followed, Ifeanyi became a quiet fixture in her life. He no longer wandered aimlessly. He wore clean clothes now, shaved regularly, and spent his afternoons under a tree at the community library, writing poems again. People in the neighborhood stopped calling him the madman. Now they called him the poet. One sunny afternoon, Chief Okeke visited the library. He stood watching from a distance as Ifeanyi read poetry to a group of schoolchildren, their eyes wide with wonder. For the first time in years, guilt loosened its grip on his heart. When Ifeanyi noticed him, there was no bitterness in his eyes, only a quiet understanding. Chief Okeke stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Ifeanyi hesitated, then took it. "The past cannot be changed," he replied. "But the future, that is still unwritten." Adana smiled, her heart swelling. She had brought two broken men to the edge of healing, and they had taken the final step themselves. That evening, as the sun melted into gold behind the rooftops, Ifeanyi handed her another folded page. She opened it to find just one line. "Some gifts are not left at the gate, they are carried in the heart, forever." She looked up to see him smiling that same soft, grateful smile. And in that moment, Adana knew this wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of another. Adana watched Ifeanyi from the window of her apartment as he sat under the old oak tree, writing in his notebook. The light of the setting sun cast long shadows on the pavement, but the glow in his eyes seemed to burn brighter than ever before. He had come so far from the broken man she first met. Still, something lingered. Adana knew Ifeanyi would never be the same man he was before. The world had shaped him, and the scars remained. But so had the love he had carried through the years. She could see it in the way he wrote, in the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke about his poems, and in the way he had learned to forgive both himself and her father. But there were days when he still looked distant, his hands trembling slightly when he held the pen, as if trying to capture something that was forever slipping away. Adana had given him everything she could: time, care, patience. Yet she couldn't fix what had broken him. No one could. One evening, as they sat side by side at the park, Ifeanyi turned to her. "You know, I'm not cured, Adana. I'll never be the man I once was." Her heart dropped. She didn't know what to say. "But you," he continued, "you gave me something I hadn't had in years, a reason to breathe. A reason to hope." Tears filled her eyes as she reached for his hand. "You're not broken, Ifeanyi. You're whole. You've always been." He smiled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes completely. "Maybe. But sometimes the past doesn't let go so easily. And sometimes, it takes more than love to heal a person." Adana nodded, understanding the truth of his words. Love had brought him peace, but it couldn't erase the weight of the years he'd lost. The pain still echoed in his eyes, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. They sat in silence, the only sound being the rustle of leaves. That night, as she said goodnight to him at the library, he handed her a poem he had just written. She read it slowly. I've walked the dark streets, but your light brought me home. Still, I carry the shadows, for they are mine to keep. Adana held the poem close to her chest, a single tear falling down her cheek. She knew this was as far as their paths could go together, and maybe that was okay. Some love stories weren't meant to be perfect, they were just meant to heal. As Ifeanyi walked away, he looked back and smiled that soft, bittersweet smile. And Adana smiled back, knowing she had done something beautiful, even if it was imperfect. Even if it was fleeting. Some love stories live on in memories, carved into hearts forever. The end. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, like and drop your comments below. We love you all.